Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you send us, cut through the noise, and build a shortcut directly to the core of critical information. Today, you've given us a fascinating stack of excerpts from an alternate history narrative that plunges us right into the decades following an alien invasion.
And this isn't your standard, laser blasting conquest story.
Not at all. It's a deep dive into the long, grinding, and utterly messy occupation of Earth, or as the aliens call it, Tosev 3.
That's right. Our mission today is to synthesize how the arrival of this vast alien force known as the race, or by the more colorful local terms like the big uglies or simply lizards.
Yeah, I like big uglies.
Me too. How their arrival created this massive instability that they were just fundamentally unequipped to handle. We're looking at all the unforeseen consequences.
The shocks.
Exactly. The geopolitical aftershocks, the surprising biological vulnerabilities, and the deep, deep cultural challenges that follow a partial, an inconclusive conquest.
Okay, so let's set the historical baseline here, because it's the genesis of all the chaos we're about to get into.
It's everything.
When the race launched this massive colonization fleet, they were operating on intelligence gathered 1,600 years prior.
1,600 years. Can you imagine? That's 800 of their planetary revolutions as they calculate it.
And their scouting probe found a world mired in the Dark Ages. Tosevites swinging swords and wearing, and I love this quote, rusty chainmail.
Right. So they expected an easy stroll, a walk in the park, total victory with minimal fuss.
And instead,
the irony is just crushing, isn't it? And it underpins the entire narrative we're looking at. Fleet Lord Atvar, he's the commander of the whole colonization fleet. He has this thankless job of managing the fallout from this generational miscalculation.
He's constantly having to explain it to his own people.
Constantly. He reminds his subordinates, like Commander Refit, that while they wished the big uglies had stayed primitive, and I quote, the sorry fact is that they did not. In those 16 centuries, Tosevites somehow, miraculously developed industrial civilization. They went from a medieval society to the atomic age.
So the race arrives with interstellar travel, devastating orbital weapons.
And they find humans armed with nuclear bombs, with fighter jets, and this aggressive, rapidly advancing technology base.
And this foundational shock, this single error, it means the race is paying a huge price.
A staggering price. They weren't prepared for a prolonged war of attrition. Atvar, for all his immense power, is constantly battling internal dissent and these casualty rates that are just off the charts.
All because of the Tosevites' continual revolts.
Right, and that's the key takeaway right at the start. This is not a conquered planet, it's a global insurgency, and that level of ongoing resistance tells you immediately that total control is, and always will be, a complete fantasy for them.
Okay, so let's unpack that geopolitical reality on Tosev 3. The map it's a complex mosaic.
It's a mess.
It is. The aliens control large occupied territories, places that were maybe less industrialized or got hit really hard in the initial fighting.
Right.
But the real power players, the strongest human nations, they remain these defiant, independent, not empires.
A great phrase.
And our sources, they focus relentlessly on the high-stakes relationships between the SSSR, the Soviet Union, the Greater German Reich.
And we should be clear here, for clarity, this is a Nazi state. It survived, but under very different geopolitical pressures.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the United States.
And if you're looking for volatility for the most explosive flashpoint, you have to look at the relationship between the race and the Greater German Reich. The Deutsch.
It's a powder keg.
It is. The German leadership is driven by this extreme expansionist and, fundamentally self-destructive ideology that just makes compromise impossible.
The researcher Felles, one of the lizards, she observed that even among the naturally aggressive Tosevites, the Deutsch were just noted for their savagery.
Yes, and their habit of killing anyone of whom they did not completely approve. That ideological rigidity means they view the occupation not as a defeat, but as, a temporary pause.
A halftime show.
Exactly. A pause before their next phase of global dominance. And that makes them uniquely, terrifyingly dangerous to the race's whole stability project.
And the race figures this out pretty quick, which forces them to change their whole diplomatic approach.
Oh, they have to. Fleet Lord Atvar, he's an experienced commander. He initially tried to use conventional imperial tact, the way he would with any other species they've conquered.
But it backfired.
Completely. He realized that with the Deutsch, that tact was, and this is a direct quote, taken for weakness. He had to pivot his strategy entirely.
To what?
To extreme rudeness, to bluntness, He concluded it was the only way to ensure his threats were actually taken seriously.
It's a fascinating look at this, ancient imperial power being forced to adopt the crudest communication style just to survive a negotiation.
Because the stakes couldn't be higher. No, the relationship just culminates in these mutual destruction threats. You have Ambassador Afani and the German leadership. We see Himmler involved in one of these exchanges. And they're playing this terrifying game of global chicken.
Himmler basically says they'll burn the world down.
He states it explicitly. He says they have the capability to wreck this world and we will do it, rather than submit. They are willing to embrace Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods.
And what's the race's response to that?
Calculated and cold. It's delivered by Vafani, confirmed by Atvar. They say, fine, we will ensure German destruction, even if it means our own severe losses.
They'll trade pieces.
They will. For them, the race views mass destruction not as some, ideological finale. It's a necessary, brutal subtraction that has to be carried out to secure the long-term future of the empire. They are willing to pay the price, but only if the Germans pay the ultimate price first.
So if the Reich is just pure aggressive volatility, this threat of self-destruction, then the Soviet Union, the SSSR, they represent calculated caution, realpolitik.
Absolutely. We see Vyacheslav Molotov in a really precarious position. He's just been rescued by Marshal Zhukov during the suppression of Belyaz's coup.
Which is a good reminder that the humans kept fighting each other even while the aliens were invading.
Oh, of course. So Molotov has to constantly calculate. He's weighing the Red Army's power and its strategic value against the immediate threat of a nuclear exchange with the race, and he knows the race has this overwhelming technological advantage.
So what's his strategy?
It's masterful in its cynicism.
Yeah.
He is conspicuously avoiding moving Red Army troops anywhere near lizard-held Poland.
Why there specifically?
Because if he massed troops on that border, the race would naturally suspect a surprise attack. And they wouldn't wait to find out. They would preemptively incinerate Moscow with orbital strikes.
So he's playing the long game.
The longest game. Molotov's goal isn't immediate victory, it's survival and future gain. The Soviet hope, the brutal piece of realpolitik you mentioned, is to profit if or when a full-scale Reich versus race war erupts.
He's waiting for them to bleed each other dry.
He's waiting for the inevitable breakdown that benefits the SSSR. He wants both the Germans and the lizards decimated, allowing the Soviets to just sweep in, reclaim lost territory and influence. The dialectic, as Molotov sees it, might just favor the Soviets if they simply wait for their enemies to destroy each other.
But this conflict isn't just contained to the big three nations in the race. It ripples all through the occupied territories, and it breeds these complex and often deadly internal human power struggles.
Oh, absolutely. The example of occupied Poland is just a perfect illustration of how power fragments in this interregnum period.
And the character of Mordecai and Ilyelovitz is crucial here.
He is. He's a clever, capable, and highly dangerous Jewish leader who survived the initial chaos. Now he leads a resistance group that operates in this completely fractured landscape.
He's playing all sides.
Literally, he's playing the race off against the Deutsch, the Poles, and the Ruskies. Regional Sud Administrator Bunim, he's a race official, he's forced to concede that Anilevitz's organization, which, historically and demographically should be the weakest, it's strengthened solely by his exceptional ability to maneuver between all these hostile human factions. He's leveraging the weaknesses of the conquerors and the ancient hatreds of the human occupiers.
Which makes him a massive target.
A huge one. The sources reveal he was the victim of an assassination attempt. It was orchestrated by one of the big, ugly groupings with no great use for Jews. He knows the game of power in occupied lands is just ruthless.
The level of trust is zero.
Absolutely zero. Anilevitz's notes with this deadly pragmatism that if he found proof that Bunim, the race official he is nominally working with, had arranged the assassination attempt,
He'd retaliate.
he says, I would probably try to kill him in retaliation, and he knows it. This isn't diplomacy. It's a cold, constant exchange of calculated threats between every single group involved. The sources paint this vivid picture of occupied Poland as a place where your survival just hinges on your ability to predict who your current ally is going to betray next.
And this global instability, it pushes some Kosovites to just seek escape entirely. We have the case of David Goldfarb. an ex-RAF officer who's trying to emigrate from Britain to Canada.
And his reasoning is so telling. He points out bitterly that the UK is tilting more toward the Greater German Reich with every passing day.
Which highlights this massive, insidious shift in the global order.
It does. Britain, it's been weakened by the initial war. It's located right next door to this monstrous Reich. It's slowly being politically and culturally compromised. Goldfarb isn't just leaving the race's influence, he's escaping the Reich's shadow.
And his own superiors don't like it.
Not at all. His superior, Group Captain Paston, views his desire to leave as an act of betrayal against the RAF. He threatens him with a bad conduct discharge. It shows how much the military bureaucracy has internalized these authoritarian, controlling tendencies required to survive alongside the Nazis. The old ideals of the RAF are just crumbling under this new geopolitical pressure.
And the Canadian perspective is equally telling, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Goldfarb observes that Canada, way over on the other side of the Atlantic, treats the Reich as the secondary danger, the lesser danger compared to the race. Their security attention is focused more and more on their powerful neighbor, the USA.
So the whole threat landscape has shifted.
Completely. This subtle shift in threat perception from a global conflict to a more regional one, where the German threat is just one part of the new normal, it illustrates just how fundamentally the invasion has altered human alliances and concerns.
And it even changes his personal perspective.
Right. The sheer scale of North America makes London, the historical center of his entire world, seem small and suffocating by comparison. The world has literally gotten bigger and smaller at the same time.
Okay, here's where we pivot from political control to the failure of technological control. And this is where it gets really interesting. The humans are not content just to fight on the ground. They are contesting the final frontier, space itself.
And this forces the race to fundamentally adapt its own deep space protocols. They have to confront the possibility of Posevites reaching their homeworlds.
The primary technological game changer here is the American spacecraft, the Lewis and Clark.
Right, and what makes this ship such a unique threat is its propulsion system. It's based on continuous acceleration.
Explain that, because most rockets are different. Right?
Totally different. Most rockets deliver one massive initial kick, and then they just coast. They're locked in free fall, basically, until they reach their destination years later. The Lewis and Clark, however, is designed to be under a tiny but continuous acceleration. The source mentions something minuscule, like 0.01 g.
Now, for you listening, 0.01 g sounds almost negligible. Why is that specific tiny push such a technological leap that it's this disturbing to an interstellar empire?
Because it completely breaks the math of space travel as they understood it. That 0.01 g doesn't just add up, it compounds the ship's velocity over time. As Johnson, one of the human scientists, notes, at the end of a day, we're going 5 miles a second faster than we were when that day started.
Wow.
Over weeks, months, a year. This means the ship can reach the outer planets, and crucially, the race's homeworlds, in months instead of years.
It's likely some kind of advanced nuclear propulsion.
Probably. Some form of continuous thrust nuclear drive, making it capable of far, far shorter transit times. And this completely changes the strategic map of the solar system. It makes human attacks on Tau Ceti a frighteningly real possibility for the conquerors, much, much sooner than they ever anticipated.
And the power of the Lewis and Clark is enhanced by this American strategy of ostentatious secrecy.
I love that term.
It was created specifically to look like a high-tech science vessel, right? To prevent the race from suspecting it was an orbital fortress.
And that uncertainty, that ambiguity about its capabilities gives the Americans immense leverage. It makes the race hesitant to just attack it, unlike what they did to the German ship.
And that strategic information gathering is already paying off.
Huge dividends. The sources confirm that the humans aboard the Lewis and Clark have already used their position to identify the race's core planets. They've pinpointed Tau Ceti, which the aliens call home. They've found Epsilon Indi, which is Hallis, and Epsilon Eridani, or Rebetev.
And knowing the precise locations of the enemy's power centers, that's the first critical step towards strategic parity.
It is. It demonstrates this long-term ambition to take the war to the enemy that just far exceeds anything the race expected from a defeated species.
Meanwhile, the German space program, spurred on by American success and, driven by the Reich's hunger for vengeance, is also pushing the envelope. They have their own ship, the Kaith, which they later renamed the Hermann Göring.
But the race demonstrates its hard line in space very, very quickly.
They destroy it.
They just destroy it, no questions asked. And that destruction is a calculated strategic move. It confirms the race's absolute zero-tolerance policy for any unmonitored human weaponry or spacecraft in orbit.
And Fleet Lord Advar uses the incident to send a message.
A chilling one. He sends a warning to the U.S. ambassador, Henry Cabot Lodge. He explains they destroyed the German ship because they were not interested in taking chances with what it might do. And then he adds, pointedly, and you can feel the threat in the words, "We do not know what the Lewis and Clark is doing either."
So it's a clear, non-negotiable signal.
It's, your continuous boost ship is under intense scrutiny, and we will eliminate any perceived threat without hesitation. But this brutal clarity, it doesn't de-escalate things. It just accelerates the global tension toward all-out war.
Which brings us back to that chilling shadow of nuclear retaliation, which just haunts every single conflict in these sources. The humans use explosive metal bombs, which is their term for nuclear weapons, and the memory of those initial exchanges is still fresh.
And we see Sam Yeager, back on Earth, using the American network to find leads about who might have detonated these bombs against the race's colonization fleet during the initial arrival.
And why is he doing that?
Because he fears that specific, localized attack could have triggered a total species-ending nuclear war with the race. He's trying to understand the chain of events that almost led to total annihilation.
The fear is immediate and visceral, especially in Europe.
Oh, yeah. The sources show the Germans aiming rockets tipped with these explosive metal bombs directly at Poland, which is controlled by the race.
And the local human resistance groups, like the Jewish and Polish fighters led by Anielewicz.
They're actually fighting alongside the lizards against the Deutsch. They're hoping the race can neutralize those missiles, or, failing that, retaliate by turning the Reich into a lifeless wasteland.
That is just a staggering moral complexity. You have humans actively fighting alongside their alien conquerors, hoping for the nuclear destruction of another human adversary.
It just shows you the extent to which the ideological conflict with the Reich overrides any sense of species solidarity.
They're willing to accept the horrific environmental risks.
Completely. Even Molotov in the SSSR fears the continued nuclear fallout blowing into his own country. So the nuclear threat becomes this regional ecological disaster, not just a military one. But they're willing to risk it if it means eliminating the Nazi threat. The nuclear genie is out of the bottle, and it's shaping ground tactics and alliances in these really terrifying ways.
Okay, let's move from the largest scale of technology and geopolitics to the smallest scale of biology. Because here we find perhaps the single greatest and most humiliating unintended consequence of the entire invasion. A simple tosophyte herb, ginger.
It's a cosmic joke played on the conquerors.
It really is.
The ginger paradox is the defining biological vulnerability of the race on Tosef 3. It induces a frenzied urgency in the mating behavior of both their males and females.
And you have to understand, the race is naturally highly disciplined. Their mating occurs only during these tightly controlled seasonal periods that are dictated by their homeworld's long solar cycle.
Right. It's predictable, it's orderly, it's controllable. And what does ginger do to the female specifically?
It just throws all of that out the window.
For females, tasting ginger immediately brings on their mating season. It can lead to potential gravidity, the laying of a clutch of eggs after mating. This forced, immediate biological change just throws their tightly controlled military and administrative structure into total chaos. It undermines the very foundation of their rigid social order.
Imagine an entire officer corps suddenly overwhelmed by this uncontrolled, immediate biological imperative.
That's why the race expends vast resources trying to suppress the trade. It's a direct existential threat to the empire's stability.
And the addiction, crucially, crosses all ranks.
Yes. Phyllis, she's an expert on conquered species. She should be the model of detachment and discipline, and she confesses that she craves ginger. She calls herself an addict.
Her shame is intense.
It is. She notes that her constant internal battle is to wait long enough after tasting it to prevent her pheromones from being released and exciting all the males around her. She literally has to manage her own body chemistry to prevent a professional disaster.
And it's not just her.
Not at all. Even Straha, a disgraced, exiled commander, uses ginger. He values its ability to temporarily speed his wits. It gives him a brief rush of clarity, despite the inevitable depression that follows.
And the shame.
And the deep shame of his subordinates, knowing that he tastes. So it's literal biological addiction to a foreign substance that just destabilizes their most prized imperial traits. discipline, control, and long-term planning.
This biological chaos stands in such sharp contrast to their attempts to impose their rigid, ancient cultural structure on the Tosavite.
A structure they're very proud of. The race's society has been stable for 100,000 years and more, based on a strict hierarchy and the veneration of emperors past.
And they just expected Tosavites to do what? Just accept
We
it.
did. Their attempts at cultural imposition are clumsy and deeply, deeply resented. They try to enforce veneration by fiat, demanding participation in their rituals. For instance, the race orders attacks on big uglies trying to enter their own house as a superstition.
Meaning churches, mosques, synagogues.
Any human place of worship. They have to pay a fee to get in, and this is meant to discourage local religious practice and subtly promote emperor worship instead.
But the immediate human reaction is just fury. Resistance.
Of course it is. Jewish congregants are outraged. They're crying an outrage, an imposition, and demanding to know how poor Jews are expected to pay it. This isn't just religious zeal, it's a stubborn cultural resistance to any external control, regardless of the faith being practiced.
And we see this conflict crystallized at the Moshe Russi Medical College in Jerusalem.
Yes. Students there are privileged. They get to learn the race's advanced medical techniques, which is a massive advantage for any Tosavite doctor. But there's a non-negotiable condition.
Mandatory attendance at the emperor's shrine at least once every 20 days.
Right. And this creates an acute personal crisis for students like Reuven, who's a devout Jewish student.
He finds it impossible.
It's impossible for him because of his own religious beliefs. He struggles with the ethical cost of attending the college. He has to compromise his faith to gain this knowledge.
But his classmate, Jane Archibald, she approaches the mandate with complete secular detachment.
Jane's perspective is fascinating, and it's also a little chilling. She finds the mandate logical. She just shrugs and says, if I don't believe in what I grew up with, and I don't believe in this either, where's the difference?
Wow.
She views all belief systems, her own, the Church of England, and the race's emperor veneration, with equal skepticism. Her compliance isn't submission, it's pragmatic indifference.
Which highlights two very different forms of Tosavite stubbornness.
Exactly. You've got religious adherence on one hand versus secular pragmatism on the other, and both of them frustrate the race's attempts at cultural control.
And this cultural rigidity, according to the senior researcher Tumels, it's making the race less adaptable on Tosav 3.
It is. They expected immediate Tosavite adoption of their language, of their veneration for their emperor, but instead, humans just cling stubbornly to their old ways and superstitions.
Which raises a profound existential question for the empire.
A question that's voiced by Atvar's adjutant, Pishing. He asks, but what shall we become if we do adapt our methods to those the big uglies use and understand? The race needs to adapt to survive this low-level generational fighting that's going to define the occupation. But adaptation means potentially embracing the chaos and the emotional unpredictability of the Tosavites.
So adaptation risks them losing the very identity that has defined them for millennia.
The stable hierarchy, the 1,000-year planning cycles, all of it. They're running up against a new situation, a situation not familiar to its males and females, where their ancient stability is proving to be a massive liability.
All right, let's shift our focus now to really the most fascinating cultural and biological experiment detailed in these sources. Casquid, the human female raised entirely by the race on a starship since she was what they call a hatchling. She is their attempt to create a perfect, assimilated, big ugly subject.
And her acculturation is comprehensive, but it's tragically flawed by her innate biology. She knows only the race's language, which she speaks imperfectly because human vocal cords are fundamentally different.
She needs tools to even function in their world.
She needs artificial finger claws to operate their computers. And her worldview is entirely derived from her captors. She believes that, quote, in the Empire, all Tosavites would be at peace. She deeply hopes her spirit will be cherished by the spirits of emperors past. She genuinely thinks of herself as ugly, but at least she thinks she is civilized.
Her entire identity rests on her being not a wild Tosavite, but contact with Sam and Jonathan Yeager, the wild Tosavites. It shatters that carefully constructed identity.
It creates this intense identity crisis. She realizes she is Sam Yeager's biological kin. Her every physical movement, which is different from the race.
Like having to turn her whole head to look at them instead of just flicking an eye turret.
Exactly. That physical limitation for a Tosavite constantly reminds her of her biological difference. She looks at her reflection and finds herself very ugly. She finds the wild Tosavites strange and bewildering because she just can't reconcile their emotional chaos with the order she was taught.
Her physical existence is a painful paradox. Tomels, the researcher overseeing her, worries constantly about Tosavite diseases.
Which forces Casquet to undergo these complex and painful Tosavite immunizations. They cause fever, lassitude, and permanent scarring on her arm. She's acutely aware of her status.
She knows what she is to them.
She does. When she submits to these painful procedures, she acknowledges her fate with this deep resignation. She says, well, if I'm going to be an experimental animal, I had best be a good one. Is that not a truth superior, sir?
That's heartbreaking.
Her shame is compounded by the brutal fact that despite all her psychological conditioning, her physical body and the needs of her immune system constantly remind her she can never, ever fully belong.
And at the same time, the inverse experiment is happening down on Earth with Jonathan Yeager, Sam's son.
He represents the acculturated Tosavite.
He speaks the race's language fluently. He adopts aspects of their culture in this casual, almost hobbyist way. He uses body paint to declare himself an electronic instruments repair male.
He finds the race fun and exciting and fascinating. He's a fan.
The contrast is just so stark. Jonathan's parents, they struggle to understand his perspective.
Sam Yeager eventually figures it out. He realizes that for his son, imitating the race and their culture is a game. It's a hobby that gives him status among his peers. But for Casquet, who is deprived of her own culture, he says, it's the real thing.
And that difference highlights the sheer resilience of a human culture that's left intact.
It can absorb elements of the conqueror without being fundamentally transformed. Jonathan's immersion is playful. Casquet's is existential desperation.
The culmination of these two cultural endpoints, the wild Tosavite and the laboratory Tosavite, occurs when Jonathan and Casquet mate.
And this is where Casquet's non-Tosavite cultural conditioning is most apparent and most disturbing to you as you read it.
Her lack of Tosavite concepts of intimacy is profound.
She displays no shyness about nudity because the race has no such cultural prohibitions, and she lacks any understanding of Tosavite concepts like love or monogamy.
She views the act as purely pragmatic.
A fair exchange of pleasure. She states it matter-of-factly. You gave me pleasure, I would like to return it. It seems only fair after all. There is no romance, only calculated reciprocity. It demonstrates the success of the race in eradicating core human concepts of bonding from her mind.
So what does this all mean for the race? What's the takeaway from these two experiments?
Well, for the Empire, Jonathan represents the preferred path. He's the acculturated big ugly who might eventually be assimilated over generations. But Casquet's painful identity crisis, her realization that her body and her instincts are fundamentally at odds with the culture she was raised in, that demonstrates the limits of cultural control when human biology and the deep-seated need for strong personal bonds intervene.
So they can civilize a mind to an extent.
To an extent. But the Tosavite body and its inherent social instincts remain stubbornly alien and resistant to their total control.
Our deep dive shifts now to the physical transformation of Earth itself. The colonization fleet didn't just bring soldiers and researchers.
No, they brought their entire domestic life with them,
resulting in a dramatic, forced ecological shift on Tosev 3, a new front in the ongoing war.
The race is deliberately introducing alien fauna and flora to make Tosev 3 more home-like. It's a process they see as entirely their right as the superior species.
So this includes food sources like the grainier Safenji and the sweeter Ozwaka.
And domestic and hunting animals. We learn about the antelope-like Ziswili, which Penny, a human observer, notes graze right down to the ground. They just take everything. And then there are the smaller squeaking pet/hunting animals, the Biflum and Sionju.
And Sam Yeager, the eternal pragmatist and skeptic, he sees an immediate ecological warning here, one based entirely on human history.
Exactly. He uses that powerful analogy of introduced species in human history. Rabbits in Australia, starlings in America.
Species that spread rapidly without natural enemies and just caused ecological devastation.
He warns Straha directly that the race's animals are liable to become great pests on Tosev 3. But the race just dismisses this. Straha notes that Tosavite settlers also brought their animals to new continents and transformed the ecology to suit them.
So they feel entitled.
Completely. We rule this part of the planet, so we get to bring in our beasts.
But the sources immediately show the consequences of this short-sighted arrogance. The Biffle, that small four-legged creature, it proves to be incredibly rugged.
It does. A Biffle is shown fighting and winning against a cat in an alley. It's a small detail, but it's an important sign of its ferocity and its ruggedness.
And it can even be helpful.
One adopted Biffle in occupied Poland, named Panzer, even saved the Anelevicius family from a fire, confirming their unexpected value. but they are already running wild. The regional sub-administrator's guard admits he wouldn't be surprised if Earth was soon overrun with animals from home.
So the race is fundamentally altering the Earth's biosphere in its own image.
And guaranteeing a future ecological crisis for both the conquerors and the conquered alike.
Now let's return to the ground and examine life under the most brutal of the independent human powers, the Greater German Reich.
Where the danger is insidious and constant.
Yes. Monique Dutourd, a Roman historian in Marseille, faces these intolerable psychological and physical conditions just because her brother is involved in resistance activities.
Monique's situation just encapsulates the psychological toll of living under the Reich. She's a constant target of the SS, specifically this one officer, Dieter Kuhn. She knows the German habit of killing anyone they don't approve of.
And she's forced into a relationship with him.
A humiliating and unwanted relationship. She notes the power imbalance where, quote, he had the right to tell her to take off her clothes and lie down on the bed simply because of his status. Her historical research is her only anchor, her only escape. But even that is tenuous.
Her desperation forces her to consider horrific options.
She thinks about putting arsenic in Kuhn's wine, a desperate act of personal assassination, or seeking help from her brother Pierre's clandestine connections to disappear.
And his girlfriend Lucy offers to help.
She offers to arrange a new identity, but initially Monique refuses. She won't abandon her career as a respected Roman historian. It shows that even under this immense threat, the drive for professional identity remains so strong.
But the war changes everything.
The sudden, violent outbreak of the German race war, which forces a mass evacuation from Marseille under threat of explosion and total chaos, it just destroys her small, protected pocket of civilized life. It makes any escape option preferable to staying. That sudden shift from insidious control to violent destruction forces her ultimate decision.
And the chaos of the occupation also breeds black markets and economic exploitation, which we see throughout the sources.
Oh, absolutely. The Beirut Market Square in the former Lodz ghetto area is now a Jewish market. It's selling goods and race-manufactured items, often obtained through illegitimate means.
And the prices are insane.
Wildly inflated. The Polish woman selling eggs is charging 2 zlotys apiece, which Mordechai Enelevitz calls highway robbery. The occupation, it doesn't matter who the conqueror is, it guarantees that humans will exploit each other mercilessly for profit.
And the most profitable black market is fueled directly by the race's greatest biological weakness.
Ginger.
Ginger.
The ginger trade is highly dangerous. It involves double-crossing, threats of violence, but also high rewards, and the demand is rampant. Gorpit, a male of the race, seeks out ginger immediately after getting a promotion.
Which proves the addiction just permeates all levels of their society.
From fleet lord exiles to newly promoted personnel. And the African male, Frederick, he explicitly links his hope for financial security to finding enough ginger and the right lizards.
So the low-level war, the occupation, it forces humans to adapt.
They have to. They adopt the race's sophisticated technology, like their computer network, and they exploit their biological vices, like the ginger addiction, simply to cope, to survive, or to get rich.
We started this deep dive with the race's fatal overconfidence 1,600 years ago, based on a single, misleading probe image. And we end with a global powder keg, where geopolitical rivalries, technological leaps, deep cultural clashes, and even these unexpected biological forces are all converging into a new, complex war that threatens nuclear exchange once again.
They thought they were bringing order, stability, and civilization, but they brought a chaos that they were uniquely unequipped to handle.
Precisely. The race hoped to just transfer their stable, 100,000-year-old empire to Earth, but Tosev III's rapid technological innovation, its fierce cultural independence.
Which is epitomized by that American slogan, live free or die, or the stubborn faith of Reuven, or even the secular detachment of Jane.
And the unforeseen biological consequences of ginger are fundamentally challenging the conquerors. This planet is changing the race as much as the race is changing the planet.
They are being forced to adapt their methods to become more flexible, but it's at the immense cost of the rigid, predictable identity that has defined their civilization for millennia.
The cost of adaptation is clear. Tumuls's fears about them losing their identity, they're being realized through addiction and chaos.
Right. Felis's reliance on ginger, the mating frenzy it induces. It demonstrates that the supposed superiority of the race's stable biology is instantly undermined by a simple tosavite herb.
And their efforts to create civilized big uglies like Casquet fail when her own human biology asserts itself, reminding her that she is biological kin to the wild Tosavites she finds so disturbing.
And critically, the race views the independent Tosavite Big Ugly's strong, devoted personal bonds, their focus on their offspring, their concepts of monogamy and love that Casquet couldn't grasp. They see all that as primarily biological and a constant source of difficulty in administration.
These strong, chaotic bonds lead directly to vengeance, resistance, and unpredictable behavior that just confounds the structured lizard military mind. So we leave you with this final, provocative thought. The race is stable, dispassionate, hierarchical, and slow to change. Humans are emotional, vengeance-prone, rapidly inventive, and intensely focused on personal bonds and immediate gains.
So,
Considering the ultimate danger posed by humans, their nuclear bombs, their capacity for immediate technological leapfrogging like continuous acceleration, and their stubborn refusal to submit, does the race's stable, dispassionate society ultimately make them less equipped to survive a chaotic, highly competitive environment like TOSEV 3?
which culture, the structured conqueror or the volatile, adaptable victim, is truly the more dangerous and more likely to survive the long conflict ahead?